and welcome to Awakening Through Love, the podcast. My name is Rod Gordon.
And my name's Martina Hughes. Today we're bringing you part 5 of the Who is Rod Gordon series we've been doing. And today's topic is about Rod's experience of our relationship. So I feel a little bit vulnerable because I'm asking him questions about our relationship on the podcast. So we'll see how this goes.
And I don't know what the questions are.
Okay. First question. If you were to describe our relationship, how would you describe it?
Oh, wow. How would I describe our relationship? For me, in many ways, it's like a blessing. Like, there's so much love and gratitude and appreciation. It feels so nourishing to be loved and to be loved that way. Like, to be held when I'm hurting and struggling, to be, you know, supported and encouraged and held when I'm down, but also to be, you know, supported to thrive as well when things are going well, and to be worshipped and loved and to receive devotion and to be worshipped as a man and sexually as well. Like, it's a beautiful, like, there's a lot just in that, but to have that experience, to have devotion, to experience receiving that, it's just so healing in so many ways on so many levels. And what I've noticed is the there's a lot of healing that takes place in the relationship through our love and through the experience of that. And it's actually been a challenge to allow myself to learn to receive that. That hasn't been super easy or natural, and kind of feels like it should be. But learning to receive that and allow it in has allowed me to be nourished and the relationship to become more valuable, because there's so much that I get out of it. Like, life's better because of you, because of our relationship, than it would be if I wasn't with you. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense, and such a beautiful response. Thank you. Thank you. It's beautiful to feel you in all of that. There's one piece that I want to tease out, which I think might be helpful for other men to hear, and that is being able to receive a woman's love. I know that can be really challenging for a lot of men.
Mm.
Can you speak to what your journey was around learning to receive love in our relationship?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't easy. It was at a retreat that I had the realization. We were doing a practice around needs, and I always have been highly independent and didn't have needs. Like, I could just be a functioning autonomous person. And in some ways that was really good. That's sort of, in lots of ways, what society encourages, but it also leaves us feeling of being isolated and alone. And it also means that other people, like, that independence means that, like, even independence itself, it means not to be influenced by other people. And so there's an aloneness that happened through the independence that I had. And what that meant was I was isolating myself by being independent. I was isolating myself from other people. I was isolating myself from any intimate relationships. And it was at that moment I realized there's never been a relationship that could have succeeded, because I would never let people far enough in. And I didn't know how to. And so somewhere along there, after realizing, being independent, and I started to allow myself to need, to want. And what I realized was, it was in some ways, even if people were loving me, I wasn't receiving it. It's kind of like throwing a glass of water against a brick wall. It would just
Mm.
kind of run off or run down. It never actually went in. And so I actually started really simply. And what I did was, like, I was good at giving love, but I wasn't good at receiving it. And so to receive it, I started practicing really small. Like if somebody, like if you asked me if I wanted a glass of water, I'd say, "I know that's okay. I'm good. If I want, I'll get up in a minute and get it." I would never say yes, even if I wanted one.
Mm.
There was this sense in my body that if I accepted anything, that I would owe something,
Mm.
that I'd be indebted to a person and be controlled or manipulated. And I was terrified of that.
Mm.
And so I literally started there. It's like, oh, yeah, actually, I would. I'll say yes. And just saying yes and then allowing to receive it, myself to receive it. But I would feel excruciatingly vulnerable
Mm.
in the receiving. Like it was so uncomfortable. I really didn't know like what to do with that.
Mm.
And so I started there and started like building from there, saying yes to when people offering their help. Sometimes I felt like I need it, sometimes I felt like I didn't, but then I was like, maybe I just say yes anyway and get learned to receive and to allow.
Mm.
And it was in the allowing that I really started to receive.
Mm.
And what happened was that, you became more valuable to me in the relationship. And in some ways, I think I'd used independence as a form of protection.
Mm.
That if I didn't need anyone, and then they weren't important. But the offshoot of that is that anybody in your life doesn't feel important, valued, or needed,
Mm.
and they're important qualities to have. Like neediness is obviously not good, but needing another person is actually really good
Mm.
because humans are not designed to be autonomous people. All the research and data that comes out says that we're tribal, community based beings. And so, as I did that, what I realized was that as I allowed myself to receive, also what happened simultaneously was that I could receive more love.
Mm.
I could actually allow myself. It was in the allowing.
Mm.
And there's a letting go that happens. When I allowed myself to receive, there was a letting go and a releasing of tension, like in my body, which also allowed, other healing and stuff to take place. But also it allowed me to be nourished by your love, to be nourished within the relationship. And that sort of made the relationship more valuable. I naturally got equally more afraid then of it not working or losing you. So there's this paradoxical experience of being nourished by it and the fear increasing at the same time of the
Mm.
loss of it. So it's and in some ways one probably drove the other. Like
Mm.
the fear of, being hurt, of being isolated, like it's better to be independent and not worry about
Mm.
it. So in some ways they were like, you know, one supported the other to grow in lots of ways. So there was this incredible vulnerability that became present that I had to learn to be with.
Mm.
And that wasn't easy. So there was a deep trust that needed to happen. And trust is hard. Like trust is such a vulnerable experience to allow ourselves to have.
Mm.
And so I lent into to trusting
Mm.
and allowing and just trusting and allowing and trusting and allowing. And what happened was I got better and better and better at receiving, and I expanded my domain, like from glasses of water, which is pretty shallow,
Mm.
to being able to receive touch. Like I remember not actually enjoying being touched. I've never really liked being touched, um, especially on the head, but on the chest or the arms. Like, if I in the past, if I'd had a partner touching me there, I'd be like, why are you doing that? Like, it's so irritating. And so, in that irritation, I actually started to sit with that irritation. And what I realized was, in some ways, it was like a reaction of fear of not wanting to owe or to um, be indebted emotionally or energetically to someone, but there was also a deep fear of having, the life sucked out of me.
Mm.
As it felt like I'd been touched in a lot of ways, that felt like when people wanted something from me.
Mm,
And I've always been really sensitive in my body, but I didn't know that.
mm,
And so for me, there was this reaction and pulling away because I felt like I was being drained when people touched me. It was like
mm,
they wanted something from me, and
mm,
I felt like it was being pulled out of my body. And so when I sat with that irritation, what I found was, the fear and that was there, but then I also wasn't present to what you were actually bringing.
mm,
And so once I recognized that you were offering something in your touch, and I allowed the touch, first it was still irritating,
mm,
but then it softened and it became neutral. And then I actually learned to enjoy it. Then it was
mm.
like, I actually like this. It's nice.
Yeah.
But there's a difference when someone touches me when they want something compared to when they're offering something, and I can
Mm,
feel the difference.
mm,
And that, like, one hurts and one feels really beautiful.
mm,
And so once I recognized the beauty in that and I allowed the touch, it was almost like my body was depleted or deprived of love, but it was actually like filling it back up,
mm,
which just felt really beautiful. And like that took, like, I don't know, over a year to do all these things that I'm saying. It wasn't a quick process.
yeah.
Um but yeah, and then also learning to receive sexually, like
Mm,
for it to not be something, as a man, there's always this sense of like, oh, I have to be rock hard. I have to give my woman multiple orgasms. I have to be bringing variety. I had to, be like this circus performer, some kind of gymnast. And like letting all that go and just allowing myself to receive,
mm.
and which I still enjoy, I like to practice, just saying, don't think it's perfected. But it was this sense of just allowing that. It was
Mm,
actually really hard,
mm,
but then there was a real nourishment and an energy and a beauty and a love and connection that happened when I allowed myself to receive on all these different layers in the intimacy in the relationship. And for me, that was really valuable,
mm.
and I found it really hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a powerful description the way you've laid it out. I think that that'll be helpful for men who struggle with how to receive in relationships. And I'd like to perhaps even just offer for women who might be in that situation of giving to your partner and feeling perhaps some limitation around his ability to receive. And what my own personal practice at that time was to offer love without any pressure or expectation or need for Rod to receive it. Because as soon as I needed him to receive it or needed him to respond in a particular way, then I'm adding my own agenda, I'm adding my own story to it. And in some ways, that's what would push him away. So the more I could offer without expectation, without pressure, then he was free to journey in the way he's just described. So let's take a step back. And before we met, when your prior relationship came to an end,
Mm.
there was a decision you made. Do you remember what that decision was?
Yeah. One, I wanted some space, but the major decision that I made was that I realized, I was the one consistent person in all my relationships, and that I didn't have the skill to create the relationship that I wanted.
Mm,
Like what I realized is that there was something missing
mm,
in who I am or how I was functioning. There was just some, like, I knew a lot about feelings, I knew a lot about women, and I still couldn't make a relationship work. And I thought I'm the one consistent thing in all those relationships. So I made the decision that I wasn't going to have another relationship until I had the skill to create the relationship that I wanted.
mm,
That I recognized that in our culture, there was this fundamental belief that relationships should just happen,
mm.
that they should flow naturally, and we should live happily ever after, which is just a bullshit Disney fucking thing that's been implanted in our brains. It's not true at all. like relationships take skill and awareness, no
Mm,
difference to a career or to, to being really good at exercise or the gym or sport or any of these things. Like it takes repetition, practice, awareness, knowledge, and all these things need to come together for a relationship to work and function. And so for me, I recognized that and I was like, what the hell was I thinking that a relationship would just flow and work? Nothing in life does that
mm,
at all in
mhm,
any domain. And so, even baby lions have to practice hunting. Like it's not
mm,
like it's a natural instinct and they have to practice it. And so I realized that I needed to practice my relationship skills. I needed to practice and do something to create new awareness, to
mm,
find new ways of relating and to find different ways of being in relationships that I could understand how it would work. I always felt there was more available in relationships.
mm,
I just had this gut feeling that there's something more here and I can't see it
mm,
because I knew as a man that I craved a relationship and I also craved freedom.
mm,
And it seemed like quite the paradox. I was always looking for a woman that would allow me to be free. And that was a mistake.
mm,
What I needed to learn is how to be free, and that's something that's an internal experience before it becomes an external experience. And there's a whole lot of other things that need to be cultivated around to create that level of trust in a relationship where a woman will feel safe for you to be free.
mm,
And so for me, I went then on a mission to find, you know, those things.
mm. Can you say what that mission looked like, what you did?
Yeah, I started with a life coach.
Yeah.
So um, I started working with him, and we started working with a whole lot of stuff, but I was so relationship avoidant.
Mm,
I was like, I don't want anything to do with having a relationship. Like,
mm.
don't even think about coaching me in that direction. So,
I don't think I knew that bit before.
no, well, it was there. It was
Yeah.
really strong.
Yeah.
And he didn't push me in any
Mhm.
direction, but like at first there was a lot of healing and clearing kind of work being done.
Yeah.
And at that point I got back into spiritual healing
Mm,
and reconnected with that. And I went to America and did a training weekend over there, and then I was just like, this doesn't feel quite like it.
mm,
Like it's not it. And so then the whole relationship thing started to come up in
mm,
the coaching because it went for I think over a year.
mm,
We did either 18 months or 2 years, and somewhere in there it started to pop up because we did a whole heap of stuff and there wasn't stuff left, and then that desire started to come online.
mm,
And so he put me on to David Data's work.
mhm,
So he gave me because I wasn't a big reader. Being dyslexic, reading sucks. And there is books that I can read. And when I say that, I mean like if someone says, "Oh, that book's so easy to read," it's like they're the books I can read,
mm,
and it's like no worries. Anyway, he put me on to some audio, and he had about maybe 40 or 50 hours of audio, and I started listening to David's stuff around relationship, and there was something in it for me.
mm,
Like a really, it's things started to make sense
mm,
about relationships, what I knew about and understood about women. Sort of he connected all the threads that were missing for me. And in that, he somewhere along the line, like I started reading his books. So I read The Way of the Superior Man and Wild Nights, which is amazing. I think Blue Truth. I read a whole heap of them.
mm,
And the like with the audio, like I would listen to it when I went to sleep so that like my subconscious would soak it in.
mm.
Like, and I did this for like, I know it was about 18 months. At the 18-month mark, by then I'd met you, but at the 18-month mark, it was like his voice was the voice in my head. And I thought, I think I'm taking this too far. But it was like I wanted to embed some level of that awareness into my body, like really deeply. I needed it ingrained in my tissues so that I
Mm,
just knew it because it was just threading pieces that I had together. And there were also things that I considered limitations in his work. There was a rigidity and a dogma around men being masculine and women being feminine.
Mm.
There was an acknowledgement that we all have both, but in terms of how it was played out, it was very much men had to be masculine, and it just felt like there was not limitations to him, but to that he's created something really, really beautiful and started something that's really profound. But then Justin and London have taken that further, that
Mm.
are our teachers. But it was like in there somewhere, like I went to America and did a weekend with not a weekend, it was longer than that. I did a week of stuff with David,
Yeah.
and that was really profound.
Mm.
And so it was in all this somewhere before I actually went to America. My life coach sort of said to me, if you want to experience this stuff, there's, a woman who sort of teaches it in Melbourne. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, you do practices and you do stuff. And I'm like, dude, that sounds fucking weird. I don't want to do weird shit.
You're so weird as you are. Like,
yeah, I know.
I can't believe you said that.
Yeah. I'm a real weird because I'm also really straight and vanilla. And yeah. And so, but that's where I was at the time. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do weird shit and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, and that's when he put me on to you, and I came to my first event with you.
Mm. And so, from thinking it was weird to go and do practices with people to actually signing up, what shifted for you?
The experience of it.
Right.
So, yeah, it was weird. And, like you asked me to make a sound, and I remember going, fuck, why would I do this? Jesus Christ. And I was so vulnerable and just like, I don't want to do that. But how I felt when I left was amazing.
Mm.
I felt liberated. I felt connected to people. I felt connected to my own body, to myself. So it was just like, like my body was just like, yes, this is what I've been looking for.
Mm.
I don't know what it is. It's weird, but it feels right.
Mm. Mm. So, just to take a step back, I think in your coaching that you did, there was a letter that you wrote. Would you like to share that letter?
No. But I know you want me to. So, yeah, he got me to write a Dear Woman letter. And he said it had to be really specific. And, like I was at the time, like, I was always clear and direct, but I was a lot more romantic and waffly, I think, at that point in time. And he was a bit concerned my letter wasn't specific enough, but it also felt right for me. And so I wrote this sort of before all that sort of stuff started.
Yeah.
Like it was, or somewhere during it. So long before, maybe 4 to 6 months, 12 months before I met you. I'm not sure of the actual date. It doesn't say, but I've got it in my note thing here. I might be able to find out how long it was. But yeah, it was a while before I met you.
Yeah.
You want me to read it, don't you?
Yes, please.
Bloody woman. All right. Oh, shit. Hang on. I just put a bloody letter in there. Sorry, I don't edit these podcasts either. You have to put up with all of me. All right. Dear woman, I am unsure where to start. I'm unsure where to start this, so I'm just going to start. As for what you look like, I have no idea. I'm sure I will love you and think you are absolutely stunning, like a star shining in the night sky, illuminating my life with your radiance in a way no woman ever has. I know I'll love you from a place I have never loved before, in a way from a depth I have never or been able to previously. Your light and brightness will shine feminine beauty and express the boundless love that is all things feminine from a place of deep, unbridled love. Together, we will create greatness in love and share that with the world as a shining example of what we can become through consciousness and love, unfolding into infinity on a journey to oneness that never started or finished as it was never anything other than what it is. We will allow ourselves to see it, ourselves, others, and the universe as it is and will always be. I love you.
Mm, mm. So, so powerful and beautiful. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing it. I remember the first time you shared it with me, just how deeply and profoundly it feels like it describes our love.
Yeah, that's true. And
Yeah.
here we are sharing our relationship and everything that happens in it with the world. So yeah, it's really weird how that played out.
Yeah.
But that was just the feeling in my body.
Mm.
So the feeling was there, but there was no there was no way. It's sort of like, with a life coach, they encourage you to go big and to dream up the most massive version of what it is that you want to do or say or think or be. And
Mm.
it's like, that's not achievable. But all right, I'll write it.
Yeah.
And here I am.
And it feels like you wrote it from a place deep within you and perhaps even beyond your thinking mind at the time.
Yeah, like quite often when I write stuff, I don't think. I
Yeah.
just, it's more like it comes through.
Mm.
And so that was part of that process. It
Yeah.
wasn't like from a, thinking mind said, I'm going to write this thing. It was like, I think it was even at the start, it sort of waffles. It's like, I don't know how to start this. I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but there was like this sense of like, I don't even know what to say.
Mm.
And just in acknowledging that, like, oh, I don't know how to start this, or, what I'm going to say, like that opened the door.
Mm.
And then I just wrote. And it's like, okay, I'm not even going to worry about what I'm writing. I'm just going to read it at the end. And
Mm.
so I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then I got to the end and I was like, okay, that's it.
Mm.
I love you. And went back and read through it, tidied it up a little bit. Like there was
Yeah.
bits and pieces where my brain would engage, and there's like, you could tell the difference between, there was a quality difference between what, I can write through my brain and through what I can allow to come through my body.
Mm.
And so allowing it to come through my body is always deeper and more profound.
Mm.
And so I just edited out the crap and left the good stuff, and that's what was there. And
Mm.
he thought it was a not specific enough. And what I found was that each time I felt into it, I was like, it's wide in what it's saying, but it feels right. Like there's
Mm.
nothing I can change and feel like I'd be being honest.
Mm.
I'd be trying or efforting. It was just not, there was nothing to change. So I just left it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here we are.
And here we are.
So, the journey to here, can you talk about perhaps when you first asked me out and your journey around that?
Oh, man. That sucked. So I think I'd I'd done two evening events with you, and then there was um a men's retreat coming up.
Mm. Mhm.
And so I decided that, it felt right to book into that. And then I think straight after that, like maybe a few weeks after that, I was going to America to David's event.
Mm.
So I was like, yeah, I want to go and do this and, compare. So I I went to your men's retreat, which was amazing. Like to have a men's retreat run by a woman, every man on there had such profound experience,
Mm.
and there's a real beautiful healing. Like you have such love and devotion for men and men's issues and their challenges and their hurts and their pains. So to have that seen and heard, by a woman was so healing. It was so profound to, yeah, just to be acknowledged that,
Mm.
there is pain and challenge in men and in their lives. They're not just these, like, what is it, like that white heterosexual men are like the scourge of the planet. And so there's like no permission or space to say anything
Mm.
because it's immediately everybody else's problems or stories are worse. And in some cases, that's true. But the point being that not having any space, for my own hurt and my own pain and having it acknowledged in the ways that it was profoundly healing. And there was something in that for me that I just felt this, oh, there's something going on here. And I remember in the kitchen at the retreat venue, and I have a tendency to be pretty straightforward. I literally, you were standing sort of beside and behind me, and I turned to you and I said, "What the fuck does a man do with you? Like you teach all this relationships and sexuality stuff. You were teaching tantra at the time, and I said, what the fuck does a man do with you? Like seriously, like, and because you were single, and I was just like, man, men must be just fucking terrified of you. Like, who wants to show up to that? I feel like I'm gonna die. And that was, I don't know, on the second day of the retreat, and you took that really well. It's like you just smiled and laughed and turned away, kind of like what you're doing now. And I was like, man, women normally get really upset with me when I'm really direct, and you were just like, whatever, buddy. I'm like, damn, that was solid. That was cool. And I was like, I walked away from the retreat, and I think I rang you the week after, because somewhere in that week, like that question that I asked you, you didn't answer, and it just kept rolling through my head. That question and I realized, oh, I want to know. The only way to find out is to be the guy. And so then I was really nervous to ask you out because you already knew about my history and my past, that I struggled with violence in relationships when I was younger, um and I'd told you all that. And so I knew, you know, I knew like asking you out felt like a real risk. And so then, but then I was like, fuck it. So I just, yeah, I rang and I asked you out. I think it was a Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah. And would you like to talk about what I said to you when you asked me out, but specifically around where I'd like to go?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. So,
Your expressions are priceless.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, they just come and go. So, you were a foodie, and I knew that. And like, you were an anal foodie and very critical and judgmental when it came to food, and adamant that I think you were vegetarian or vegetarian, high quality, organic, blah, 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 all the stuff. And I was just like, when I said, you know, the first thing I said is, there's somewhere that you'd like to go. And as soon as I asked that, I thought, oh, I'm asking her to lead. That feels off. And you've gone, surprise me. And I was like, on the outside, I was like, yeah, cool. And on the inside, I was like, oh, fuck. I'm going to die. How the bloody hell do I surprise a vegetarian foodie who lives in Melbourne? And I don't spend any time in Melbourne. Like, I was down towards Torquay on the coast, and I spent no time in Melbourne. I didn't even know a restaurant, you know? So, but somewhere in all that, it popped in my head that, one of your friends was, a chef who was the one on retreats, Rach, and also Helen. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah, I know what I'm doing. So somewhere in all that went through my brain. I'm like, yeah, I've got this. And so I reached out to them. I was just like, okay, I've asked Martina out on a date, and she said, surprise me for dinner. Like, where do I take a vegetarian meal? Because I was like a full, like, almost carnivore. So, I was eating steak and bacon and eggs and that kind of stuff, man food. I even had a thing called man's tea that my son and I used to have. It was like steak, eggs, baked beans. So the can of baked beans said 2 serves of veggies in 1 can. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, that's gold. I could cook this in no time. Yeah, man's tea was solid. Actually, sometimes that involved chips. That was the that was a real delicacy. And so homemade, mind you, in the oven, healthy chips. So yeah, so I used those resources then to
Mm,
find. They gave me some great tips. They were super supportive, and I'm super grateful to both of them for that. And yeah, I found a place to take you to dinner.
mm. And we had a beautiful first date at Shakahari.
I don't even remember the name of the
Yeah.
joint, but yeah,
Mm,
I remember the food was nice. You
mm,
know, for vegetarian food.
mm.
That's my thought pattern at the time. I happen to love vegetarian food now, but yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. So, journeying forward a little bit beyond dating, at at what point did you feel the the urge or the desire within you to create a commitment to our relationship?
Yeah, I'd actually been back to America again. I'd traveled a lot to learn, and I'd been at a men's retreat that Justin and Dave and Michael were leading, which are all men I consider teachers. Um, and in there, like, it was this really potent weekend that they ran, and one of the teachers, Dave, he he was incredibly committed to what he called husbandry, being a husband, and seeing his devotion to his wife and how he loved her.
Mm,
It's something about that resonated with me. Like, he had this deep passion for loving her, and I just felt that in my body. And I was
mm,
like, oh wow, I didn't know this was a thing.
mm,
And the way that he loved her, his life was devoted to, in many ways, loving her, among other things. It was just one of the things, but his time with her was sacred,
mm,
and he treated her as sacred. And Justin was the same. Like
mm,
with London, he would treat her as sacred. And just seeing the both of them and listening to the teachings and the offerings and the way that they viewed um, relationship and intimacy, it was just so inspiring. And when I left there, it was in California, and afterwards I stayed in Santa Monica, and I'd left time afterwards just to reflect and have
mm,
space. And at Santa Monica, along the cliff tops there that overlook the Pacific Highway, is a whole heap of gum trees,
mm,
and so it felt like home. And
mm,
so what I did is I sat under one of the gum trees, just leant against this beautiful big tree, and journaled.
mm,
And I was journaling there, and it just dawned on me. It's like, this is what I want.
mm,
I'm all in.
mm,
And it was through that process that I realized that, I really wanted to commit to the relationship.
mm.
Yeah. And something really strange happened when I did that. But I don't know if you want me to speak to that. But
Yeah, go ahead.
once I committed fully to the relationship, and I was like, I'm absolutely 100% devoted to this woman, and I am all in.
Mm,
I'm balls deep.
mm,
I'm all in. And what happened was I felt free.
mm,
The freedom came through the commitment. And
mm,
it was I don't even know how that works. It's paradoxical.
mm,
But it was only through my full commitment to the relationship and to you and to being there that this liberation happened. This
mm,
freedom came online. And because I was so devoted to loving you, it didn't matter if I was with you or not with you. And something shifted in your body. Well, not straight away because you freaked out, which I
mm,
thought was funny. And we
mm.
should talk about that. Let's talk about that. And so after you settled, which took about 3 or 4 months, but um, there was, yeah, this deep freedom came online,
Mm,
and it was really this amazing feeling. It was like a feeling I'd sort of looked for my whole life, and
mm,
because men quite often want to feel free in a relationship, and the truth is, it's an intuition. They're right;
mm,
they can be totally free in a relationship,
Yes.
It just has to be done skillfully, and there's
Mm,
certain qualities and things that need to be cultivated for that to come online.
mm,
It can't be like from a needy, demanding place of I want my freedom. It's just that's not it. Like
mm.
it comes through service and love and commitment comes freedom. It's really beautiful. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was that journey.
Yeah. And I think freedom is often kind of people relate to it as being freedom from something, like freedom from demand or freedom from, pressure or freedom from the relationship. But you're talking about a real sense of freedom that arose inside of you,
Yeah.
regardless of external circumstances.
Yeah, it arose within my body.
Yeah.
And that freedom that I found internally then translated externally to the
Mm,
relationship
mm,
because of how I was being and how I was loving you. The idea of me going off and doing stuff that brought you joy
yeah.
because I was happy and excited, and you loved seeing me that way, and you felt so loved. It was, yeah, it creates this perfect storm of basically love and freedom.
Yeah, yeah. And I know all the ways that you love me means that I'm actively looking for ways to support you to feel loved. So
Yeah,
saying things to you like, oh, go for a motorbike ride or, go have some time on your own or whatever it is that you might need, like being able to recognize those things is part of how I love you, and it's that kind of thing that is always alive and flowing in our relationship.
yeah, it creates like an infinity loop.
Mm,
That symbol. And so
yeah.
the more I'm committed and devoted and love and show up to you, the more you're looking to love me.
Mm,
And what I've noticed is if I am down or flat or just not feeling good in some way, you usually notice before I do.
mm,
And it's in those moments that you'll say to me, hey, why don't you go for a ride on your motorbike? Why don't you go fishing with your friends? Why don't you go for a surf? Why don't you go for a walk? Like go and, you'll point to the things that I love, but it's always too from a place through your body, not through what you knowing
mm,
what I love, but feeling what it is that I need to
yeah,
feel whole, to come back to center in that
mm,
moment. So yeah, and it's that level of devotion and love that is it opens something in my heart, but it
mm,
opens something in my body, and the desire to love comes back online even more. And usually, when I come back from doing it, whatever the thing was, there's this real sense in my body of like, oh my God, I so needed that. Thank you. That's the thing that I needed. So
mm,
there was something that I needed, some form of connection or space, or, sometimes it's danger,
mm,
which is important for men to have that in their
yeah,
lives. So to be on that edge. And yeah, it's a really beautiful thing to have in a relationship, but it doesn't come for free.
mm,
It doesn't come through neediness or demand. It
mm,
comes through offering love, being fully committed, dedicated, and devoted. Open something in a woman's body.
mm, mm. Beautiful description. I love it. So since we became committed and uh, went deeper in our relationship, then life got a bit crazy because your accident happened
Mm.
and you had to stop hairdressing, and all of a sudden you were home. Um, how do you think our relationship supported that journey of your accident and that major, major life transition that you had to go through?
Oh, I would have been fucked without it.
Mm,
Like you were like you did everything at that time.
mm,
Like I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even lift a bottle of milk. Like
mm,
that was I wasn't allowed to. My
mm,
spine had to heal. So um like it wasn't just the physical day-to-day stuff which was essential, but even just the emotional support, like the being there. Like I was in many ways like a broken man. Like
mm,
I was there was just yeah, everything was gone.
mm,
Like everything that I knew that was life was gone, and the only thing that was left was the relationship.
mm,
And like obviously relationship with my son and my parents and family and friends and stuff like that. But in terms of what my life was filled with, It was like if you'd got a cup and just turned it up and emptied it.
Mm,
That
mhm.
all just went. So I think without the relationship, I just would have been screwed in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, mm. And I know that throughout that time, I felt so loved by you.
Mm.
So even as I was the one who had the physical capacity and was kind of carrying us physically, on an emotional level, like you made so much space for my feelings. Like even one memory that always stands out for me is coming to the hospital when you just had the operation the day before.
Mm.
And I walked into the hospital room, it was like full of emotions and like trying to hold it all together because I'm like, can't show him my emotions because he's just been through like major surgery. And I sit down on the bed and you're like, well, come on, cry. I could see you want it, so just do it. And I'm like, no, 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 it's okay. And then all of a sudden, something in me went, oh, he actually wants me to cry. He wants me to let go.
Wanted you to feel.
And so there was that sense of, yeah, you wanted the feelings to be able to move through my body. So in that, I felt loved.
Yeah.
And I felt held. So even when you were, at one of your lowest points,
Mm.
you were encouraging and, evoking me to allow those feelings to flow.
Yeah. And like in lots of ways, that's really important. Like
Mm,
it's part of like how a man loves a woman is to make space for her feelings.
mm,
And even though I was physically just came out of spinal surgery, I could still hold space.
mm,
Like I could still be there for how you felt.
mm,
And that felt natural.
mm,
And that desire was in my body. That
mm.
I could still do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I could still show up to the relationship. And in saying that though too, you're really clean with your emotional expression and
Mm,
emotionally current.
yeah.
So there's no projection or dumping,
Mm,
happening in that. So
mm,
which, quite often, it's important to be there for a woman's emotions. It's also important not to be a whipping post for someone's
mm,
anger and abuse. But so for you, your expression of you showing your sadness and showing your fear and showing your hurt and your pain, there's no blame or projection. It doesn't feel like something's landing on me. It
mm,
feels clean. And so in what that that feeling invites me in to hold
mm,
that space, because it's actually enjoyable. It's like,
mm,
I want to see what's happening for you.
yeah.
And I want to see.
Mm, mm. Beautiful. So let's talk about the step that we took towards bringing sacred intimacy more solidly as part of our daily lived experience. Can you talk about that inspiration for sacred intimacy to be such a big part of our lives?
Yeah, I don't know the exact point if you're
Mm,
referencing one, but
no, I don't have an exact point, but yeah.
okay, then as I was studying, like around this time was like I'd studied for years because I love relationships and in lots of different ways. And
Mm,
I'd done spiritual healing and spent lots of time with counselors and psychologists. And like I'd sort of absorb it anywhere I could. And a lot of my clients were counselors and psychologists. So I was always in the relationship and intimacy learning sort of thing, even when I was at work. And as as I was going along, like I was originally learning from you, then people started wanting me to just asking lots of questions on
mm,
retreats, even when I wasn't. I was just there as a participant,
mm,
and you insisted, and my other friend insisted that I start teaching and doing
mm,
something. And so when that was as all that was happening, I was studying with London and Justin.
mm,
So and I'd been connected to Justin ever since that first David Data event. He was like his lead assistant, and he went out on his own, and the body of work that he was creating, like it felt right in my body.
mm,
It was like, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. Like if I could have created something, that would have been it, but I could never have created what he's created, like in terms of his awareness around lineages and history, and he studies all the religions, and like he's amazing.
Mm.
But that's not my gift. That's
Yeah.
not my skill set. So as I was studying with him and I was doing work with you, there was something to me that felt off about the Tantra space.
Mm.
And that just didn't resonate with me. It was
Mm.
very sex orientated. You weren't. You were like, well, you did have that part of your life, but how you taught was that you were very relationship
Mm.
orientated. And it was the relationship orientation that I liked. And then London and Justin were getting more and more clear on their work, and they were coming up with really specific practices and ways of doing the work. And I was just like, I want this in our relationship,
Mm.
because this is the path that we're meant to go.
Mm.
And I tried really subtly, which is not my skill set either, to drag you out of the other space. Not drag you out, but just to point that, hey, there's another way that we can sort of operate. There's another way, and it feels more in line with who we are.
Mm.
And because at that time too, like there was lots and lots of Tantra teachers popping up, like
Mm.
people doing like half-day courses. Like, I did a 2-year course with you.
Yeah.
So there's real levels to that sort of work.
Mm.
And some people are going and doing a half-day course, and they're all of a sudden teachers.
Mm.
And it doesn't work that way. You
Mm.
have to live the work.
Yeah.
You have to live it to be able to teach it.
Mm.
And so, because of how that space was sort of heading, I really didn't want to be a part of it.
Mm.
And so I stopped at some point calling myself a Tantra teacher, even
Yeah.
though I'd done the training or whatever. Didn't want to, I just didn't, I don't know, something didn't feel right to
Mm.
me. And so then, as London and Justin sort of, they started to create their body of work, I was like, oh, that's the missing piece.
Mm.
That's it. And then I don't know how I got you to, it took ages, because I know
Mm.
you were really super resistant to any influence at all,
Mm.
and from outside. And I don't know how
Mm.
it ended up happening, but it did.
Yeah, yeah. I think because we were planning a trip to the US in 2020.
Mm.
And actually, maybe we decided to go to Yoga of Intimacy, and then we planned the trip around that. So we were like, and so I think something in me shifted, and we'll explore a little bit more about what that's about when we
Yeah, yeah.
go
No,
into
no, I want to leave that.
when we go into my journey. But yeah, clearly something shifted for me that I was like, yeah, let's go and do a weekend with them, because you'd spoken to me so much about them that I was like, wow, I've just got to go find out for myself, I think was the place that I came to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, of course, we didn't get to go to America in 2020 because the world shut down.
Yeah, that's right. And we did mentorship with Justin.
Yeah, that's when
right.
we began our mentoring with Justin firstly, and then Justin and London.
Yeah. Yeah. So adding that to what we were already doing was really rich.
Mm.
And I think it expanded our offering and deepened it,
Yeah.
because it addressed nuanced, specific details of intimate relationship and how people can make adjustments in real time. And that, instead of addressing things retrospectively, addressing them in the current moment, and also using relationship as a pathway to awakening. That was really, really key for me, because that part was important to me. I know it was important to you, but the practices, the solo practices, the partner practices, all lead to awakening spiritually through intimate relationship. And that was the icing on the cake for me. I was like, that's it. Yeah, that felt like, this is what relationships actually can be if people are willing to go there.
Yeah. And so, even reflecting back to your Dear Woman letter and the part where it says about the relationship being a journey to oneness, it's like it's that piece of being able to awaken through relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which I had obviously no idea when I wrote. That wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
But it just, that's the path that happened. And so I've been offering that and working with that with you and on my solo ever since.
And we have our daily practice that we do. Can you speak to how that supports you as a man, what's changed in your life as a result of that?
Yeah, the daily practice in many ways is probably one of the key pieces to the freedom part,
Mm,
because there's certain things that, a woman needs in relationship,
mm,
like emotionally feeling seen and heard. She needs to feel safe,
mm,
needs to feel held. And it's as if the morning practice fills the love cup.
mm.
I kind of like the feeling in my body is if I show up to morning practice and we have an amazing morning practice, I can pretty much do whatever the fuck I like after that. You don't even care because you're just full.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's this
yeah.
feeling in my body. There's a real freedom that comes from
Mm,
that. But the practice is amazing. So it's kind of like win-win. It's
yeah.
not like a chore or something that I have to do. Like the practice is divine. So
Mm,
it's, yeah, I think the practice is like the key part
yeah.
to finding, freedom in relationship, especially as a man, but
Mm,
also it's nourishing.
mm,
It creates an aliveness in my body and an excitement. Um, and it also, I also in there find my edges. I
yeah.
find my limitations of like where I'm hiding from myself
Mm,
or telling myself a story or limiting myself in some ways. Like you always find the part of me that's my next edge of growth.
mm,
So it's always revealed in practice.
mm,
And what I find is that whatever's happening in the practice is happening in the relationship.
yeah.
Practice is off, something's off in the relationship. It's sort
Mm,
of like this beautiful mirror that I get to look in each day that sort of tells me like what's happening in my relationship, where's it heading, what's happening with my purpose, what's happening with my life, where's it going. It all is reflected through practice.
yeah. Yeah. And you just referenced then like when something's off in the relationship. Can you speak to how you manage things when our relationship feels bumpy or off?
Oh, I feel like you're looking for secret data and detail.
No,
I'm
no.
not giving you my
a-
secrets.
Actually, no. What I'm kind of bringing our attention to is
Yeah.
the fact that we've spoken about so much that's beautiful in our relationship, and
Mm.
that's certainly how I experience it as well.
Yep.
I also just want to highlight the fact that we have our challenges and our bumpy times.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was the question?
The question was how you handle those bumpy times or those times of challenge.
Hide in the shed. No, that's not true. That's what I used to want to do.
And the fact that I laughed it tells everyone that it's not true, because if it was true, I'd be like,
No, but I still feel that old desire in my body.
yeah.
There's a problem. Hide in the shed. Get out of here. That used to be my, yeah, like, gotta get out of here. The first thing I do is notice it
Mm,
and then be with it.
mm,
And I think one of the really important things is that, to recognize if something's happening and I need you to be different,
mm,
I want you to change in some way, there's something I don't like, that's pretty much what unlove looks like.
mm,
So then, so I don't do that.
mm,
So then I'll notice that impulse or that desire, and then I'll look at myself
mhm,
and go, okay, so what's happening here?
mm,
What needs to change so this shifts? Like, what can I do that will actually help shift this moment
mm.
so that it's not, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And if you're hurting or sad or upset with me for some reason, which is possible, really, I know.
Not true.
I did notice you cringe. I just thought I'd check, see if I was perfect. Turns out I'm not. Bugger. I'll keep practicing. So I'll notice what's happening in your body and notice how you're feeling, and just I'll start to explore that.
Mm,
I I'll first check in with myself. Like one of the things I'll do is if you're doing, saying, or being something that I find irritating or don't love or don't like or whatever, first thing I'll do is look at how do I do that? Because the first thing is projection. So
yeah.
I'll notice that I'm projecting onto you.
Mm,
And so then I'll look for how I'm doing that or being that. And at the same time, I'll also be curious about how you feel.
Mm,
And so I'll ask you, like, what's happening for you at the moment?
mm,
You know, what are you feeling? And I'll also use that data that whatever you share is like,
mm,
how am I doing? Whatever she's sharing, is that happening for me? Where is that happening for me? Like, how do I use all this information to navigate the relationship? And so then usually in making space for your feelings will create some kind of relief. Sometimes it doesn't,
mm.
but sometimes it can't get to the core of things in one conversation or one moment.
Yeah.
um, and then I'll show up differently.
Mm,
So if you're tender and sensitive, then I will be really present and make sure that there's space for that sensitivity, and I'll be there and not need you to change.
mm,
If you're upset or hurting or sad or in pain or whatever the thing is, I won't try and fix it.
mm,
I'll still love you and be there. So if I normally cook you lunch or dinner or, watch a show with you or whatever, I'll still do all those things. I'll
mm,
still keep loving you
mm.
whilst you're in that space. I won't withdraw the love. In fact, most often I'll turn it up
Yeah.
because quite often, whatever's hurting is going to be something to do with the relationship, which means you're going to feel unloved in some way. The
Mm,
medicine is the love. So it's like, okay, I've been, distant, disconnected, not present in some way.
mm,
I need to now correct that. And so I'm sort of looking at both sides
mm,
for information because usually whatever you're saying I'm doing or is going to be true.
mm.
And I'll just automatically assume that whatever you say is 100% true, and then I'll look for it.
Yeah.
And so if you're saying, oh, you did this or you said that and it hurt, I'll look at it and go, okay, so how does me saying that hurt you? And then I'll find how that hurts you. I'll be like, right, okay, there's some part of me that was, unaware or insensitive or wasn't present and said or did the thing
Mm,
that caused the pain. And then as soon as that happens, as soon as I find the thing, I'll own it. Go,
mm,
yeah, right. So when I said this, you felt this, and I was go, yeah, I can see how insensitive I was. I'm really sorry
mm,
for saying that, and usually that will shift something.
mm.
So
Yeah.
there's a sense of always being willing to look at how I'm contributing to the dynamic of the
Mm,
intimacy in the relationship. Even if it doesn't seem like it's my fault or got anything to do with me, I'll still look for my part in it because there's always it's like there's two people in the relationship. It's always both people. It's
mm.
never one. And I'm
Yeah.
aware of that. So I just automatically, if there's an upset, assume there's something going on for both of us
Mm,
and start to inquire on both ends,
yeah.
not just one.
Mm, mm. Yeah, great description. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. It feels like that'll be really valuable for the people listening or watching. Mm,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Cool.
And one other thing that I'd like to ask from your perspective, because we do spend a lot of time together, living together, working together, which I love. I know that oftentimes what happens for couples when they live and work together is that it can feel like too much time, and oftentimes men need to be able to find some space away from the relationship.
Mm.
How do you personally manage the fact that we live and work and spend so much time together?
Yeah, like I create space for myself.
Mm.
So I have like a day off each week that's not with you, where
Yeah,
I just go and do whatever I want.
yeah.
Like I'm not a big believer in a 5-day working week.
Mm,
I think that's bullshit.
mm,
I can't work a whole day anyway because my body's like I usually fall asleep. If I work in the morning, I fall asleep in the afternoon.
mm,
By working, I'm usually editing or writing stuff, and it's not my strongest skill set. And so I find that like I'll create space, and so I'll have that day off. There's our morning practice. I also have my own solo morning practice where I'll meditate, ice bath, do movement.
mm,
So I usually do most of those things. I don't do the ice bath every morning,
mm,
but it's really important, like as a man, that when I'm having time alone or downtime, that I don't fill it with stuff.
mm,
So if I fill all my time with like say watching YouTube, I'm not on social media, but in the past, like I've used social
mm,
media, listened to music, like had some kind of stimulation.
mhm,
What I find is I don't feel nourished.
mm,
I feel irritated even more by my by or by you. I was going to say by my partner, but If
Mm.
I feel all my space, I feel irritated.
Mm.
Like if I'm on my phone reading the news or looking at motorbikes or boats or cars or whatever the thing is that I'm looking at the time, like if I fill all my space with that, then I feel drained and depleted, and I show up to the relationship drained and depleted, and then I resent it. And I
Mm.
resent you because I feel like there's a demand for my attention and I don't feel like I've got anything left.
Mm.
So time and stillness and silence is really important, even if it's only short, like 5 or 10 minutes a day.
Mm.
But that time alone lets the nervous system reset. And it's really important for men to have space, but to not fill the space. Like,
Mm.
because that's not space anymore. You're not
Mm.
having space, you're having stimulation. And so it's also
Mm.
really uncomfortable to be still and to be silent and to do nothing.
Mm.
It's a craving that in lots of ways we all have. It's like, oh, when I retire, I'm just going to do nothing and I'm going to travel around Australia. Traveling around Australia is not doing nothing, but
Mm.
there's this impulse that one day I'll do nothing.
Mm.
And that one day has to be now.
Yeah.
And so I'll intentionally create space each day where, like, I'm in silence or that I'm just, you know, doing something for me,
Mm.
so
Mm.
that there's a sense of always keeping some level of emptiness and nothingness in my body so that I feel I have something or I have space to offer.
Mm.
Because quite often, you know, being with a woman means that she's going to want to take up space. She's going to
Mm.
want to talk, connect, feel all these things.
Mm.
And so, in lots of ways, like the man has to learn to be that space.
Mm.
And to be that space means to have space in the body. So, to have space in the body, there needs to be some emptiness and some stillness and some time alone. Time in nature is really good.
Mm.
Walking, surfing, like whatever you do in nature.
Yeah.
Like, but time where you're not talking or receiving information. I love going for a ride on my motorbike.
Yeah.
Like, there's that sense of there's no data coming in my ears, but the the presence that's required to
Mm.
ride a motorbike, and there's nothing else happening in that moment. It
Mm.
feels really delicious.
Mm.
So, I do things like that that are important to me
Yeah.
to fill my cup, and it's going to be different for all men
Mm.
depending on their life experience, how they've been brought up. We're organisms, so we're
Yeah.
just being trained by life.
Mm.
So whatever stimulation we've had is going to be whatever we like or dislike.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be the same, but whatever it is, there needs to be space alone
Mm.
each day.
Yeah.
So I have no problem living and working together. Like, we don't work in the same room each day. Like, even that, having that separation is cool. um Also, like, in terms of creating polarity in a relationship and being aware about resonance,
Mm.
like, that's really important for me as a man. I think the resonance piece, and I know I'm sort of speaking, everyone may not be able to follow this, but resonance, like constant unconscious connection,
Mhm.
is very draining and depleting for my
Mm.
nervous system.
Mhm.
Like, holding hands, touching, kissing all the time, like anything like that feels like a pull on energy, like
Mhm.
being drained, like someone wanting love from me and taking it.
Yeah.
So, learning to navigate the relationship consciously so that touch is always intentional.
Mm.
And what I find is that that means that there's more space in my body, so I have something to offer.
Mm.
Whereas if I feel that's being grabbed at all the time, then it's very depleting.
Mm.
And then I resist any connection, which
Mm.
immediately feels like hurt and pain to you.
Yes.
So it's at managing my system and my body in a way that I can show up to intimacy and relationship ready for it.
Mm.
And then I actually, by doing that, I desire it.
Mm.
Whereas if I'm, rubbing up against you all the time, touching all the
Mm.
time, all I want to do is get away.
Yeah.
So creating space, even while we're together, is
Mhm.
important piece. So there's that sense of n- feeling nourished in my body by the emptiness, the spaciousness, the silence, but then I can also offer you that in the relationship.
Mm.
So there's lots of sort of, that's really nuanced,
Mm.
specific stuff that I'm talking about there. But even, even not touching when we sleep, like, even, like, our teachers will stuff pillows down between them. We don't go that quite that far, but if I'm going to cuddle you or hold
Mm.
you, I'll do that intentionally and for a period of time, and then go back and lay on my own and go to sleep.
Mhm.
And so there's always like intention around how we're interacting so that it's created consciously. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what you've just said, it's like intention and creating consciously is such a massive part of your life and our life together.
Yeah, and in lots of ways, that's what it takes to create an intimacy
Mm,
is a clear intention of what it is that you want to create and
mm,
to intentionally go forward and do it. And that's doing it consciously.
yeah.
And then there's a chance to build whatever it is that you want to build.
Mm,
And so people don't have to build our relationship, but
yeah,
we can help them build theirs their way. And
absolutely.
it does look different for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's
Yeah.
perfect because everyone's life's slightly different. But without the intention there, a man will always feel trapped in a relationship.
Mm,
If he doesn't create space for him, if he's expecting his woman to create space for him or for me, if it's for
mm,
you in relationship, the relationship's doomed
yeah.
because it's the opposite of what her natural impulse is. The
Mm,
natural impulse is for connection. And usually the feeling in the body is, I want more, which is
mm,
the longing and yearning piece. But that man can't use that to navigate his life. That's a mistake. He'll end he'll end up hating life and hating the relationship, and he'll resent the shit out of her.
yeah.
And so the way to navigate that is to be really intentional about how space is utilized and
Mm,
how time together is spent so that it's not depleting and that it nourishes both people,
mm,
that it's not just for the woman but it's for the man too, and how what does he need to feel whole within that intimacy,
mm,
and how can he use that then to show up to her more fully,
mm,
because the quality of the time spent together is always better than the quantity. And
yes.
often it ends up the quantity is the demand because there's going to be a feeling of loss of connection for a woman if a man's not present.
Mm,
And so she'll demand more and more time and he'll feel more and more trapped. And then they just ended up that typical relationship you see in our culture.
yeah.
But to reorient to something different, conscious intention,
Mm,
intentionally creating space and learning to be still in that space.
mm, mm. Beautiful. One of the things that I already shared with you this morning, but just kind of to share with the people who are listening is I noticed this morning Rod and I would both gotten up and done our separate solo practices, and I was still in the space where I do my solo practice, and I was journaling at the time, and I looked up and I saw Rod watering the garden, and we made eye contact, and we both smiled, like genuine, whole bodied, like delightful smiles that were just pure joy at seeing each other. And it touched me so deeply, my own experience of smiling, but also receiving Rod's smile, because there was that sense of like, I feel delighted to see him. And I felt his delight and love towards me. And it was just like, I love that we're 7.5 years into our relationship and that we have that kind of response to each other, and that things are just becoming more beautiful, more deep, more connected with each passing year that we share together. So, yeah, thank you for sharing yourself, your life with me. And thank you for sharing everything you've shared on the podcast today. Is there anything you'd like to share to kind of sum up or conclude today's episode?
Nah, just that I'm glad to be not talking about myself anymore on my story. It's a bloody relief. I'm done.
Awesome. So, just so you know what's coming next, we switch into talking about my life and my story.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Beautiful. Thank you.